Hello, this video is for CIS 200 Unit 13 challenge work. It's on page 5 of lesson 6 in the Exeter LMS. You would click Launch Activity to open it in Cengage. I've already clicked Start within Cengage, and it is only one question. So we are developing a computational model for essentially an airport runway, right? So now we're going to go ahead and define our system events. Plane arrival. So incoming flight enters landing queue. Plane departure. Outgoing flight enters takeoff queue. Runway clearance. Plane finishes using the runway, freeing it for the next flight. We can go ahead and call this event core algorithms. So call this a procedure. On plane arrival, the variable would be flight. As you know, whenever the plane's arriving, it is an actual flight. So we're going to say in queues, flight into landing queue. So on plane arrival, the flight that is arriving is placed in the landing queue to eventually land, right? So we'll say end procedure, start another procedure. On plane departure, the plane is taking off. That specific flight. In queues flight into takeoff queue. In procedure. So we essentially stated that this plane is ready to take off. This flight's ready to take off, and we placed it in the queue. Procedure. Now it's for the runway, right? So we'll just call it check runway. So if runway is idle, then, so we'll do this after checking the runway if it's idle. If landing queue is not empty, then, so if the runway is idle, then we proceed to check the landing queue. And then if it is not empty, we remove flight from landing queue. And then we set runway to busy for landing time, as the flight in the landing queue is going to be landing on the runway, right? So the runway is currently being used. Else, if takeoff queue is not empty, then, so if the runway is idle and the landing queue is empty, we move to check the takeoff queue. And if the takeoff queue is not empty, that means that something is queued within it. We are going to remove flight from takeoff queue, because that flight is now taking off. So then it will be dequeued from the takeoff queue. And we are going to set runway to busy for takeoff queue, for takeoff time, as that flight is taking off. So now we'll say end if and our enclosing if. So this end if right here ended this one. Now that we've cycled through all of that, we're going to end this enclosing if for checking if the runway is idle. And then we end procedure. All right, one more. So we will just call this one the main simulation loop. So procedure, main simulation. Initialize, landing queue, and takeoff queue. So initialize landing queue and takeoff queue to empty. That's their initial state, right? Set runway to idle. It's not currently being used. Set current time to 0. So while current time is less than total simulation time, do the following. So while current time is less than total simulation time, we are going to do the following. So if new arrival occurs, then call on plane arrival, and then this will be the new arrival flight. End if. This should be indented because it's inside the if. So if there is an incoming plane, right, we're going to call the function on plane arrival because that new arrival flight is arriving. Otherwise, if it is not, then we check the new departure, check if a new departure is occurring. So if new departure occurs, then scroll up. If new departure occurs, then call on plane departure, new departure flight. So if a new departure is happening after, of course, that we checked it if a new arrival is happening. If there is no new arrival, we then check if a departure is happening. If there is a new departure occurring, we're going to run the logic for that departure as it is a new departure flight. We'll end this if with an end if. And then we will, of course, check the runway after each and every arrival or departure. So we call check runway. And then after we check runway, we're going to increment current time by 1 minute. Increment current time by 1 minute after checking the runway. And now we are going to end the enclosing while. So all of this happened within this while loop, right? So after that's done, you can just call some, administrative function if you wish. Print, we'll just call it statistics. You get the average wait time, right? And the max queue links. And then we're going to go ahead and say end procedure. So end procedure. So this entire procedure was the main simulation loop. And that is it for the only question for Unit 13 challenge work. Save it as a document, then convert it to a PDF and save it and submit that PDF, please. And that will complete Unit 13 challenge work. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I hope that you found it helpful. Have a great rest of your day.